If you aren't familiar with my channel, I'm an Apex Legends coach that has done over 1,000 coaching sessions, and I'm here to break down 5 secrets that pro players use and abuse. Let's begin. Starting off with number 1. Now, everyone always asks me to make a video on this and how to effectively do it. And although each situation will be somewhat unique, let's actually break down an example and see how pros effectively push a team that has better positioning than them. The first thing to notice in this clip is that every player begins to take a different route as they close in on this building where the enemies are at. While doing this, you're going to have to be careful so that one of you doesn't get singled out and focus fired. But if you do it right, you can all swarm the area so that it's super difficult for the enemy team that's holding that area to prevent your team's push. Now, as this team encloses the building, you'll see that Sweet takes a very high IQ angle, one that most players either don't know or wouldn't think to know of in this moment. He goes to the window, and at the same time he does this, Chaotic approaches from the balcony. And this is also all done without any communication between them. Sweet knows that if one of his teammates goes to the balcony, the enemies will be positioned in a way that he could shoot them through this window. This goes on for a little while as Sweet stacks some serious damage against them, and then the enemy team realizes his angle and tries to counter. At the same time this happens, a new team tries to get involved. And since Sweet's team is on the outside of the building, they are going to take the brunt of this. They have to pause and rethink how they're going to do this push, or if they even want to. After regrouping and discussing that pushing this team is necessary because they need their loot and they need to eliminate their leverage in order to handle whatever's next, they once again begin to breach the building. Chaotic goes to the balcony, Daltouche walks up the staircase first, and then Sweet follows. This makes this push incredibly difficult to combat because the enemies will be caught off guard and just most likely overwhelmed. Notice how Sweet didn't walk up in the same space as Touche. He let him go first so that he could do some damage and then he could trade out with him. This makes it so that even if Touche takes damage and needs to back up, Sweet can be so close and just play off any previous damage he did. And if Touche doesn't have to back out, well, it's going to be the same outcome. They aren't going to have to struggle shooting one another in the back because the staircase is such a small, confined area. But with this coordination of taking different angles and timing it well, they're able to successfully breach and eliminate this squad despite all of their advantages. I mean, this was a Wattson team, holding high ground and playing in a building that was pretty good for a Wattson. But unfortunately, this team just gets backed into a corner and gets overwhelmed with the multiple angles and ways in which that Sweet's team attacked them from. Now, on the topic of getting overwhelmed, we need to talk about something serious. Cybersecurity can be very overwhelming to manage, from robocallers and scammers to malicious actors trying to steal your identity or profit off of your private information. If you don't know what to look for, you might just miss it in plain sight. Luckily, there's a company like Aura out there that's got our back, and they're the sponsor of today's video. Aura is an all-in-one digital security app. They make protecting your identity easy so that you can just focus on what's important to you. Aura will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Aura can monitor your emails and passwords to see if they're involved in a data breach and exposed on the dark web, and then can give you recommendations on what to do from there. Aura also has a VPN, password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, internal parental controls, and protects your devices from malware. Aura also partnered with the NBA's Minnesota Timberwolves on a multi-year partnership as the team's official digital security partner. So click the link in the description, aura.com/mangos, to get started with a free 2-week trial and see what information of yours is out there. Thanks to Aura for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. Number 2, the ability to make do with very little loot. This is often something that I try to work with players on because I believe if we can lower the bar on where they're comfortable with loot, it can make them become a better player, but probably not for the reasons you're thinking. There's really 2 reasons I focus on this. One is so that they focus on what they have and what they're looking for nearly at all times. Learning where they can actually find loot is a huge thing that players struggle with. Maybe not so much for advanced players, but it's something you're going to have to gain and continue to build on as you progress in Apex. And number 2 is so that they aren't trying to overloot in situations where fighting with what you have is totally fine as long as you realize how long that loot can theoretically last you. I mean, look, sometimes you're just going to have to fight with what you have and you just have to accept it. But there's going to be other times where you just have to keep a tab on it. Okay, I've got 60 bullets and this will last me, this long. And from there, then I have to have a different plan. But regardless, with these clips with Hal that we're looking at, he's essentially a minimalist with loot. There's very little time that he spends on looting. But even when he does, he just elects to grab the bare minimum from death boxes that he knows will have some stuff in it. He doesn't waste time trying to wander around this POI looking for scraps because he knows there's nothing really to be found. There were 2 teams that landed here and most of the loot will now be on the bodies. So when he shoots his guns on the low ammo that he does have, he tries to make sure that the bullets really count. He's not spraying from super far away in hopes of doing 10 damage. He's trying to finish kills. Looting is actually a skill in Apex. It takes time to master your inventory, to know what you have, to know what you need, and to know where to get it. But what you need will be kind of subjective from one player to another. But looting in and of itself is sort of boring. It's not flashy, not too many people talk about it, not in depth, and so many players just overlook it. Now, Hal is definitely an extreme example of this. And that's why I chose to talk about him regarding this topic. If you've watched him before, you know at times this can be a downfall for him in some ways. He will always underloot and miss out on grabbing things like light ammo and then yell at his teammates for them to drop him some. It's comical, but it's also important to note that most of the time when he does this, it's in competitive Apex, and this is a drastically different game mode than ranked. In ranked, Hal and his team will just about push every fight they can. But in comp, it's not like that. It's much more strategic, so the opportunities to gather loot will be scarce. If you miss an opportunity to capitalize on the loot that you do find, well, a few minutes later, that can come back to haunt you. It's what I like to call the domino effect. A decision we made previously, whether it was 2 minutes or 5 minutes ago, can come back to affect us in the present. And looting is very much so intertwined with the domino effect. So learn from this and understand that sometimes you're just going to have to fight with the 30 bullets you have in your magazine. Try to make the most of it. Don't be firing from far distances and hoping that you maybe do 10 or 20 damage. Really save those bullets and understand your circumstances. This also will apply to your shields and your health meds. Don't be putting yourself in vulnerable positions to take a ton of damage if you don't have a ton of shields or heals to get you reset and ready for when the fight does eventually come to a head up close. Number 3, and this one is very, very important as you try to climb the ranks and really progress in Apex. The ability to remain flexible. But what does this even mean?
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
Gets the people going.
It means in a battle royale game, there's often going to be a lot of threats to deal with, and you need to be able to consider them at any given moment. In order to get really good at this game, you need to remain flexible and be able to turn on a dime as soon as another team tries to get involved with whatever you're trying to do. In this clip here, you'll see TSM take a fight shortly after finishing a fight, only for the same thing to repeat itself right after. This not only takes a special form of chemistry within the team to be able to deal with this, but also it takes really good awareness around what's happening to you and how you can actually deal with it. With 2 knocks and a third party approaching from behind, TSM doesn't even worry about the remaining solo on the first team, and all 3 of them elect to focus their attention on the much bigger threat emerging. They do this because it's obvious what deserves their attention in this moment, but also logically, there's no way to do anything about the solo without getting punished by the new 3-man third party. To analyze this a step further, the remaining solo will most likely just run away or try to grab banners while TSM is distracted with this new team. A key factor that allowed for TSM to quickly turn their attention to this new third party was the ability to armor swap off the 2 kills that they previously just got. This allows for a snap of the fingers reset, and it can keep your head on a swivel because it's like, okay, I had to worry about my shield bar, but now I don't, and now my attention is solely focused on this new team emerging. Now, it's one thing to have this awareness and this flexibility, but it's a whole other thing to win in these hectic situations, because skill is going to be a huge part of this. And this brings me on to number 4, but it's probably not what you're thinking. Now, some of you guys are probably thinking the obvious. Well, these guys have some of the best aim in the entire scene. And while yes, that's true, it's just a bit too obvious. That correlation can be made by really anyone. So I just want to look at it from a different angle, one that's more nuanced, and one that will also benefit players who may not be as naturally gifted with their aim. Check out this clip and tell me what you notice.
I hear somebody.
I heard someone blow. Yeah.
I'm jumping
Yep.
down.
I got a bat. Careful, you're dropping into 2 of them.
No, no.
One shoot forward, close, somewhere.
In the knockdown, he's in the knockdown, in the knockdown, in the knockdown.
On me. Behind you guys.
Got him.
In the long run.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is team firing. They absolutely rolled this team. And it's all because they moved in this SWAT team-like formation and team fired every enemy they came across. This is always going to be the most oppressive thing to deal with in Apex because one person cannot possibly shoot 2 enemies at once, but 2 players can quickly kill 1 enemy. Team firing is something that is vital for progressing in Apex, but it doesn't just end there, because in order to successfully pull this off time and time again, your awareness needs to be dialed in. If you don't know the ins and outs of every piece on the map, you're gonna want to learn that. This is what will make team firing that much easier. Because hear me out. If you know the map and you suspect or know a player to be in a certain area, well, you can instantly try to attack them from a favorable position in that area. Your teammates will automatically do the same and hopefully from different angles, and you guys will have successfully achieved team firing them when you go to attack them. See, Hal's team rolled the first team, and then quickly after, they repeat the same steps on the next team. And honestly, it makes the opposition look pretty bad. But I promise you, even if these players aren't Apex Predators or equivalent to pro players, they aren't just trash. TSM was just so quick, oppressive, and strategic that they made it look like this enemy team stood no chance. To add a little bit onto this, the team firing starts to be that much more difficult to deal with when players are really quick to execute it. And I hope you guys see it for what it actually is and not just overlooking it and go, oh yeah, it's because they're good and they're rolling a Masters team. That's not it, I promise you. Moving on to the last secret, number 5. Despite how you may feel about the current legend meta in Apex, one thing all pros and high-level players do is take full advantage of their legends kits. They create a synergy amongst the other legends on their team, and they learn how to use their abilities in the best ways and at the best times. In this clip here, TSM patiently waits for a team to come out of one of the IMC armories on Storm Point. They maintain high ground so that when this armory opens, if executed correctly, TSM can bombard them and make it virtually impossible for this team to do anything about it. On a side note, I understand the whole risk-reward thing around looting while doing something like this, but Apex makes a lot of these things really feel like huge setups. From trials on World's Edge to armories on Storm Point, it feels way too easy to get some cheeky advantage over the team who elects to upgrade their loot. I don't know. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. As the top opens, Reps throws his Cyril down and Hal throws his gravity lift over the jump pad that could launch the team out. This then overrides that ability for them to do so the enemy a team has to elect to stay in. Hal then throws his black hole inside, coupled with an arc star, and tries to get some initial damage. This is all that is really needed here when you couple it with some additional gunfire to gain this huge edge on this team. From there, the rest of their gunplay and focus firing takes out this squad. In the second clip here, TSM takes this isolated 3v3 towards the end of the game. And I really like the use of abilities here. First, Hal tries to take an aggressive Q onto the roof and challenge the enemy that was just there. But when he arrives, that player already dropped back down. He then uses his ult here, but I'm not so much of a fan of this because it's going to be really hard to play off of any significant damage or distraction that the ult could do here. If Hal did get some damage here, he would then probably have to drop down and be isolated away from his other 2 teammates. But putting that aside for a moment, what I really like is as he drops down, him and Reps take out the Valkyrie. Hal then realizes he needs to heal, but he elects to throw his Q first and then starts to pop a battery, so that he can then take the Q while finishing the bat and be landing by the time it completes. This only shaves off seconds, but it allows for him to be at the scene of the crime quickly, and this way TSM can team fire and beat these guys with strength in numbers, as it's a 2v3 when they are all together. Now this was a brilliant use of his tactical here, and I wanted to be sure to point it out. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn all about how his Watson dominates in ranked, well, I covered it all in this coaching breakdown here. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.